Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, or good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to another edition of Therapeutic Thursday with me, John Quick. You may know by now we've done a few of these, and the reason I'm sitting in the host chair is I am also an aortic dissection survivor. I had a type A dissection, the ascending arch, which involved then emergency open heart surgery, the fitting of a prosthesis in the ascending arch, and a replacement aortic root in the valve and titanium valve. And subsequent to that, I had a dissection in the descending aorta down to the bifurcation in my legs, which has been, as is very common, probably all know by now, defensively managed with medication. And I am 18 years out from that event. So I'm just got my voting rights as an aortic dissection survivor. And one of the other reasons I'm on this show, as you would call it in the US, would call it probably a program in Britain, is it was such a life-changing event for me, as it is for many people, that I had to kind of realign my life and have a reflection on what I want to be doing with my life. And I'd always been very interested in psychology, and I started doing various courses, gaining qualifications, and then starting to work with organizations and so forth, and helping people, particularly around issues which were relevant to my condition, like PTSD, grief, and other issues related to that. So I just thought I'd spend a moment also kind of focusing in on a little bit on what we're trying to achieve in this show, and to emphasize that, of course, I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't give specific medical advice. And also, we're not trying actually to make these therapy sessions as such. I mean, I'm not going to be asking kind of questions of, about Freud and the influence of your father. But what we are trying to do is maybe provide an environment where people kind of can share and hear other people's experience, which may be comforting, where we can possibly explore some strategies. Also, hear some kind of, from the horse's mouth stories of fellow survivors, which people may be able to take succor and help from, and whereby we might explore some strategies, think about it in new ways, perhaps give a little bit of a pillar of kind of confidence to people who may be struggling. Because, for example, with my experience of kind of 18 years, an awful lot of things have happened in that time. It's not always been plain sailing. But I would absolutely say that, particularly even in the last few years, that I have grown more confident as the scans show such stability. And the guest who I'm going to be speaking to in a moment, Rob Seltzer, mentions in his survivor story that he talks about recovery and how long recovery takes. Actually, I think kind of recovery is always an ongoing process, because recovery is, adjustment to life, and there are always going to be new challenges around the condition. And as people have probably heard me saying, banging on about it, the more we can move to a place of acceptance about what's happened to us, that it has happened, that there's nothing we can do about it, the more we can move forward with our recovery, rather than feeling the kind of drag of what we might have lost, the kind of, oh, I'm not what I used to be. I'm not saying in any way that we disrespect that or we don't give it its place, that perhaps we have to mourn an old part of ourselves. But acceptance, I think, is a very important part of this condition. I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go through a little bit more. But now I'm delighted to welcome Rob Seltzer, who is better known to you probably as the Aortic Chef, which he does I understand it's a weekly basis. Rob, I understand, is 3 years out from his dissection, so a little bit closer to the event than I am, and that'll be interesting to talk about that. So without further ado, I'd like to plunge in with Rob. Hello there, Rob. Can you hear me?
Yes, John, I can hear you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on
So
this one.
that's lovely to have you. So would you feel like telling us a little bit about, your experience and why don't we start with where you find yourself in the present moment in relation to what I've said about recovery and acceptance, given what you say in your survivor story that it was a life-changing event for you, of course.
Absolutely. As we know, it is a life-changing event, enough that I even now I dissected on March, the evening of March 21 in 22. So 3 years ago, I just had my third aortic anniversary, but that's now my new birthday. So it's definitely life-changing, life-altering in that sense. Um, but now, I mean, 3 years out, I am, well, I'm a lot better as far as both my physical and mental health. The first 6 months were extremely challenging. The next were still challenging. I had a lot of hospitalizations and all that. Plus, I had to retire, take medical retirement. So, but that left me, now I'm in a place that I'm very happy to be, honestly. One, I've just recently moved this last month after 37 years in Florida. I moved back to my home state of Michigan. And of course, I woke up this morning to snow on the ground. So it's a real welcome back.
Yeah.
But that, and I'm closer to the family and stuff, to my kids and grandkids and all that, and that's part of it. So the new me at this point is actually, I really believe, happier than I was before my dissection. I believe that my life has changed for the better as a result of my dissection. And
well, straight away, there's plenty to get into there. Let's work our way back from that by you saying the new me. Tell us a little bit about the new me and how it differs from the old me.
Well, the new me, probably my major focus in life was work, as many of us have. I'm a chef by background, and we are known and do work ungodly hours, all day parts and holidays and everything. There's hardly, especially depending on the operation, but we work a lot in that business and in the hospitality business. So by retiring was a major change, because that left me with lots of time on my hands. What am I going to do? How do I deal with this? And I had to get over that change. I mean, I did fight retirement for a while, because my workplace wouldn't take me back. I was too much of a risk. And so I did fight, but eventually I gave into that and said, okay. And then I decided to take the opportunity to just do all the things that I've wanted to do, and that it'll enrich my life. One, be closer to family. We had grandkids up here, and now that's probably the main reason for coming back. Be closer to them. Seeing them, twice a year or so really isn't enough for them. And they're young. I don't want to miss all those years. I missed enough of my kids as a chef. I mean, I was absent a lot. So did not want to do that. And then also just the time not to do other things that we wanted to do, and to make sure that whatever years I have left, as I know and understand and accept that, like we said, these are things we can't change. And we have to, I try to focus on the things that I can change. And that is my lifestyle. So I've integrated a lot of travel. We've, even after 6 months, have done things, went and, climbed partially up almost, 4,000 feet up a mountain. In 23, I went to Europe for 2 months and just trekked around like I was a kid in college with a rail pass and just going where we wanted
That's
to.
amazing. Yeah,
And,
very
you
brave
know,
of you, because uh, for a lot of people that might have, the event perhaps inhibits their confidence to do those kind of things, but you, it doesn't sound like it has with you.
no, believe me, I take care, I take caution. You know, I have a whole suitcase, my med bag, as we call it, you know, with all my meds
Mm.
and blood pressure cuffs and things that we need in order to travel. And I have a book that I carry that has my medical history in it and copies of my CTs and all that. So that if I do have to go to a hospital, they have all the information necessary. And we've even researched before we go. There's a group called IRAD, the International Registry of Aortic Dissection, and these are hospitals around the world that are do a lot of uh, aortic research, and that's the organization they belong to and speak to each other. So we knew where every single IRAD hospital was in Europe.
That's
Yeah.
a really useful source, isn't it? And
Yes.
perhaps we should publicize that a little bit more. So, are you kind of saying that, you know, it's not a pleasant thing in any way to have happening, but it's kind of made you realign your values a little bit, and that you were working very long hours. It's sort of changed, you know, what you think of as important in life.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And it, you know, makes you realize how fragile life is, that, you know, it
Hmm.
can it can end at any moment, you know, and we don't know. We can do everything we can to prevent it, you know, live a healthy lifestyle, you know, see your physicians, take your meds like you're supposed to, all those things. But still, in the end, we don't control that final moment. And that's why my life saying, which many people watching this know, is do it now, because we
Mm,
don't know what I don't know what tomorrow will bring. So just
absolutely, yeah.
do it now. Here.
So I'd like to come back to that if we can in a moment. But I think it would be useful for people to know also, who are perhaps, you know, only out a year from the dissection or less, or maybe a little bit more. Are you happy to tell us about some of the challenges that you met, and what was particularly challenging about them?
Sure. Well, physically, I mean, there were the challenges of trying to just get your strength back and feel like a normal person. You know,
Hmm.
those first weeks afterwards, where you can barely walk to the bathroom or stand for a while, or just standing up from sitting down, all those things are a real challenge and make you wonder. You know, at that time, you can tend to feel, you know, is this permanent? Is this my life from
Yes,
now on?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, am I going to be disabled like this forever? Is it a disability? And I personally think not. And so that struggle, plus
Mhm.
the complications that arise. I ended up in the hospital 10 times in the first 6 months after my surgery, and had a second surgery in that time as well. But all with just things that just happened. And luckily, uh, I did go to the hospital when I needed to. So that challenge, you know, those were tough, and they eventually got lesser and lesser as I regained strength. Mentally, um, those challenges were, again, you know, the new life, as we call it, our new life, and dealing.
Hmm.
The biggest thing is the fear. You know, when you first have your dissection, and oh gosh, there's still a little bit, but there's a great amount of fear built into your everyday life. You know, when's it going to happen again? Is it that fragile? You know, if I do um, something, you know, if I lift this or I do that, am I going to dissect again? And if I go outside, if I, whatever it is, there's a lot of fear, a ton of fear. that's involved. And overcoming that fear is a real challenge, working at that. And it takes time. I mean, there's a lot of tears, and I see that from other people as well. The crying is, I don't know, a lot of it triggers. I always joke because my wife, whenever she sees a sad part in the movie, I'd have to hand her Kleenex because she always cries in movies and such. I started crying with TV shows and movies, especially if there's a hospital
Ah,
scene or somebody dies or all those types of things. I mean, it would just make me bust out. And then just
and
random moments.
did you reflect on that, why that was happening to you at the time?
Oh, of course. I mean, those, the hospital scenes and stuff, they were just triggers of what happened to me and
Yeah.
would make me just go back into the ICU and the whole event and everything of what happened. And I guess also feeling those people's pain that are in the story relating to it that made me very sad. Um, but
Mm,
again, it's gotten lesser. I still do, though. Even 3 years out, there are moments uh, where I can get triggered. That just, and I understand why. So I let it
mm.
happen, and get it out.
So what I would say about that is people may watch shows and think, I don't want to watch anything about that because it makes me cry. But actually, I would say that the crying can be very cathartic, and we need to do that. And crying is always a truth.
Hmm.
It's telling us something. It can form a very useful purpose. And were you a person who cried before, and or because there's that whole thing, isn't there, that men don't cry?
No, I've had my share of tears, but just it was crying at lesser things, new things,
Hmm.
that would come that would trigger it. And I think it's part of, probably you would say, even it's part of that grieving process too, you know.
Mm.
And I always, cried before when I've grieved, when I've lost my parents or family or friends, which I've lost quite a number, and that was always difficult,
Mm.
you know.
Yes. So what and the little bit that we've talked, what I've sort of picked up with you is you've sort of been on a journey where your resilience has grown and you've actually become much more kind of positive and optimistic than you were in the initial months. Um, it was interesting in your survivor story. You talked about the doctors saying that your condition was complicated, um, and then the word impressive was used. And I like the way that you were able to kind of see that with some kind of humour. And you said to me that you've always been quite mellow. And did you lose the mellowness, and that started to kind of come back?
No, not really. I think that's what kept me somewhat on an even keel, to a point.
Okay.
I didn't have the real anger, uh, and I had no uh, I didn't get angry at others. I know, I've heard some people, they get very angry at their caregivers, they get angry at the world. But no, I just kind of sit back and more contemplative and just kind of working, like I say, on that
Hmm.
acceptance is just okay. I've always had that kind of
Yeah.
acceptance attitude about a lot of things, so.
Yeah, and you heard me say at the beginning that I think acceptance is a very important part of the recovery process, isn't it? But we can't always just switch it on, can we?
No, no, it takes some work. I did that too. It took things that I had to do. A big part of it, which is making a plug for you, and I tell other survivors, people know I'm always very active in the organization, and I'm on Facebook a lot and talking and chatting with other people. And a big part of my recovery was the acceptance, and then accepting that, I really do need to go to therapy because
Hmm.
dealing with this, and that's even the crying, the PTS. Some of us say we don't try to say PTSD because they don't consider it a disorder. We just have post-traumatic stress. And my doctors told me that, every
Yeah.
doctor, my cardiologist, my primary care, they all said, you have PTS. When they said PTSD, you've gone through more trauma than someone in a major car accident or getting shot or any of those types of things. It's no one should suffer the amount of trauma that we have. And it's really difficult to deal with it on your own. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
took me a while to finally say, okay, it's time. I really need to see somebody. And best thing I ever did, really was best thing I ever did.
So a couple of things about that. I think one of the difficulties with recognizing one has PTSD is we are living every minute, and after the condition, after the the incident, whatever we want to call it, it's we're in such a survival mode that everything's kind of unfolding, everything's kind of new, and other people may observe that we're not the same, but perhaps we're just kind of taking it moment by moment. We're just like trying to cope. We don't necessarily recognize that we've kind of gone off the path so much emotionally. But can you tell us a little bit about what you think talking to someone therapy gave you?
Well, it was hard to see in the moment, honestly, but I did find a therapist that specialized in PTS, and
Mm-hmm.
she was very good. But it's mostly talking sessions like this, almost, but sitting and discussing just my feelings, how I felt since the last time, but really getting into and trying to find the triggers that would make me have those really bad moments, those moments of fear, the crying, uh, whatever, and how to possibly deal with them. So I was not in for that long. I think I don't actually remember. It was probably about 4 months, maybe. I know some take longer, some shorter. I think I got through it pretty quick. It was shorter than I expected it to be when
Are
she
those
told me.
weekly sessions?
Yes, they were weekly sessions.
Mm.
Yeah. And so it helped me just, I guess, just cope with, understand what's going on, and just work my way through it with someone other than, I mean, you can talk to your family, to your spouse, or to your friends, but they can listen. Sometimes they give bad advice. So, speaking to a professional just is a little bit different, and it just really seemed to help. And we did a little EMDR, which was interesting, and I've heard other people say it's helped them a lot too with the triggers.
Uh-huh.
So
I think one of the things that therapy can bring to our kind of situations is actually go to see the therapist, and there is a sort of a third person anonymous voice there, because with this condition we can be very much in ourselves, very much in the first person. All of a sudden we can be talking to somebody else, and they can help us to reframe it. It's something I use a lot, but about filmmaking analogies, that with this condition we can be very much in the close-up of our own worries, of our own anxieties, of our own stresses. And good therapy would encourage people to be able to get the camera back into a wider shot and begin to be able to be less attached to the fear and less attached to the stress, less attached to the anxiety, and be able to see with a bit more objectivity, oh, this is what's happening now. This is what I'm doing. There's my trigger. And then we begin to have the tools to be able to then control it a little bit more when it's happening, so we're not so maybe swept away by the fear when it happens. Does that make any sense?
yes,
To the world?
yes, definitely. Yeah, and the suggestions, on when those things happen, just how to deal with them, and that was the other therapy, the EMDR, the motion therapy, which seemed to work, and I use it for a while. I don't really rely on that. She had me she had me find first, and that was difficult to find, the happy thought, something that made you feel good and comfortable. What's the really, what is good? And I finally came up with something, created something, or just knew, and so that in those times of darkness to, you know, switch your mind, switch your thoughts, and go to that happy place. I mean, we've heard that in movies and books and all that,
Yeah.
but it's real, and if you can, because
Mm.
I understand you can only really think about only one thing at a time. So if we start thinking about that happy place, that good thought, what makes you feel calm, and it kind of just makes the whatever is happening subside and go away. And
Yeah.
and that training didn't, it took training, but it helped. It really did.
Yes. And it is a kind of reframing of the mind, isn't it? It's become, it's learning the technique of doing that,
Mhm.
which, yes, I agree, can be very, very beneficial. Mustn't forget Joshua, who's with us and who might have one or two messages for us from the world out there, people who may be listening in. Hello to everybody.
Sure. Let's say hi to Velda and Tom, Michael Smith,
Hi, everybody.
Hey
Carrie.
guys.
Any any comments from anybody so far?
Carry on.
Okay, so what would you sort of say to people about, the process of the kind of 3 years? What have you learned most of all about in that 3 years, would you say?
Well, I think we've said some of it, that we have to go on. We have to get up and get out, as long as we're physically able. I know some have real physical challenges as a result of the dissection, but we have to, I've had to I can't let this thing conquer me. I can't just sit around and wait to die. Okay. Need to I guess it boils down to that, what I said earlier, do it now. And I really try to live every single day and make sure that I don't let unpleasant things get in the way of my life anymore. If there are people I used to tolerate that put negativity into my life, they aren't around anymore. Okay, I don't really want to be with those people, and doing things that I don't really like, other than things you have to do. Like I don't like going to the hospital, but if I have to, I do. But and making sure, and I plan, and I do make plans for things to come, whether traveling and things like that we have to do. And that's the big thing, really. And just the appreciation. I had a partner in my business, one of my businesses years ago, and whenever you asked him, how are you today? Or, how's it going? He goes, always good. It's just every day's a good day. And I used to learn that, every morning that I wake up, it's the perfect start to my day. And I try to live that.
So, lost my train of thought there, but I'm thinking that this is such a sort of change in your life that maybe you are putting yourself first a little bit more when you say that you don't tolerate, why tolerate the rubbish? Why don't sweat the small stuff? People are negative. Do you feel that you prioritize yourself a little bit more in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely do. I do think of myself first. I'm the most important person to me. This is me.
Mm.
And without me, I can't, do any of those other things or be with those other people that I love and want to be with all the time. So I've got to make sure that I'm here.
So the message there for us, it might be that by looking after ourselves, we're more able to look after other people, aren't we? Because, self-care is important. It doesn't have to, there's nothing narcissistic about self-care. But the more we take care of ourselves, that helps our confidence, doesn't it? We feel more at ease, and then we've got more to give other people.
Right. Oh, definitely. We've got to, the self-care, yeah, it's great. Taking the meds and eating healthy and doing the things that we need to do that maybe we haven't done, exercise, the stuff that some of us don't like to do. But yeah, that makes it important as long as this, we don't take the self-care to the extreme, which is easy. It's easy to just sit around. And while I'm taking care, I'm making sure I'm being careful with my life by just staying here and watching TV all day or whatever it may be, and not taking risk and chance. I think that's also important. We take some risk. Get out there. It's everything in life is a risk. So
yes. And how has it been for your family, this change in your life?
Well, it was difficult. I mean, obviously at first everybody was very concerned, very worried. But I think I've raised my children with the same attitude of life. They're very accepting. My middle daughter was a major force in our moving back up here. She's the one with the kids. And she's like, she tells us, you're not going to be here long. We know you're not going to live till you're 90, probably most likely. We hope you do. But the numbers aren't in our favor, So she says we need to maximize that time and do whatever we can, and the same thing with my son and my other daughter. They're all, pretty much the same. My younger daughter who lived with when I had my dissection. She's the one that was home. My wife, Mindy, wasn't even home. She was here in Michigan and I was in Florida when my dissection happened. So I had the pleasure of calling her and telling her what was from the ambulance on the way to the hospital before we knew what was happening. But my youngest, she was pretty devastated because she has a lot of anxiety anyways, but she was a champ. But so she was very, very close to it, and saw me almost go. So, but that was different. And Mindy's been there the whole time, and she's a little more tolerant of me since that happened. She puts up with some more of my stuff. If I get angry.
Mindy as a carer is going to be joining us on the shows soon.
Yes.
It's easy to forget, of course, that family members can have PTSD by proxy. I mean, just the way you talk about your daughter there, that it was pretty devastating for her. And you talk about in your survivor story, her following you in the ambulance in the car. There's a lot of trauma there for her, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because there's that difficult thing of like, it's out of her control.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about that. It's a trigger for me, still a big trigger. But
I picked that up as you were talking.
Yeah. When you mentioned her following me in the ambulance, and she told me the story later and I knew I was on the phone with Mindy, and the EMTs had said that, Mr. Seltzer, you're not having a heart attack, but something's wrong. And so they were going, and we did not have lights and sirens. They might have had lights, I don't know, but we were driving to the hospital, which wasn't that far. It was about 5 miles from my house. and she was right behind us. And then all of a sudden, the EMT shouted to the front guy, "Let's go," because something happened. I don't know. They had he saw something, and all of a sudden they hit lights and sirens and went from 40 to 70, and right blew through the lights. And my daughter was on the phone with her sister. And
Take
she
a
said,
moment if you need to, Rob. Just take
"Yeah,
your
I'm all
time.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've told the story, and it's good. Every time we tell these stories, it makes it a little bit easier. The
Sure.
therapeutic value." But she told her sister, "I think Daddy just died."
Oh,
So I get more upset about what she was going through.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
that trauma by proxy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
she had it very hard. But she found out I didn't die. So, because she met me at the hospital.
Mm.
But, so it was very, very interesting. When I want to ask you a question about some of the things that happened, and I've heard it with others as well. So I was awake, this whole time dealing with everybody and in the ambulance. And I get to the hospital and went through triage. And from the moment I got to the triage desk to the moment I woke up in my bed in Gainesville, which was they had to airlift me to another hospital the next day after surgery, intubated. I don't remember a thing, totally blackout. But yet I was cognizant that whole time. When I was in the hospital, I gave all my information. I'm talking to the nurses, the doctors, my daughter, having conversations. I was in a lot of pain, but I was there. It's not like I was unconscious. But yet my mind has totally wiped that period, those 12, well, I guess it was, about 16, 18 hours, just totally gone.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Off the cuff, I think everybody responds to this differently. It could be a coping mechanism on the part of your mind. It could just be the effect of the general anesthetic and and the bypass and what it does to us kind of mentally. Thinking back to my own situation, I was on my own. In your survivor story, you talk about the pain starting in the jaw and then beginning to spread. And you began to feel it with my situation. I got up from the chair. I felt this massive kind of explosion in the upper part of my chest. I can remember the next 3 seconds staggering across the room, and then I collapsed, and then nothing for, I believe, for about another half an hour, when I began to recover consciousness on the bathroom floor. I had no idea about anything. I had no idea who I was. I had no idea about what the world was. It was bizarre. I could have been, floating in outer space. And so gradually some consciousness began to come back, and I realized I had a huge problem. Something catastrophic had happened. I actually knew in the moment of the tear that it was catastrophic. I just knew. But then gradually my memory came back, and I remember the number for in England emergency services is 999. And I was able to call that number. In relation to what you're saying about kind of memories, then I can remember key moments of the paramedic coming, stuff like, can you get the door open, things like that, which is such a key question, in heart attacks and things like that, and I would always say to people who are aortic survivors and things, don't have too many locks on your door. And then various moments on the way to the hospital, then initially being seen and then later transferred. A similar thing where after some time in the hospital in West London, there were two doctors standing at the end of the bed and 2 ambulance men, and one of the doctors suddenly completely lost it, started swearing, effing, and saying, we need to go now. And that dawning realization that something is very serious. But like you, I can then remember arriving at the next hospital, thinking I was in an episode of ER, looking up at the ceiling and seeing all the lights and things like that, and being asked to sign the papers and being told I didn't have a choice. But actually, so I do remember more than you of that period, but I've no idea why that might be at all.
Yeah, I guess it's just our mind dealing with it. What it decides what we can handle and what we can't. Because there was a lot. My daughter said I was, and I'm very pain tolerant, very, very pain tolerant. And she said I was, screaming out in pain in the hospital. And I believe that was probably in the first hospital because, I said I felt it from the carotid down and, to the, to the arch and that, and I felt it in my chest. And that's when I even told her in the house when I got her that I think I'm dying, and so I realized this was catastrophic. But then I wasn't in any pain in the ambulance or any of that, but I think I continued to dissect when I was in the ER. And that's when I was having more pain, I imagine, because we all know that's if you feel this unbelievable pain, that we go through. But I did recently on my anniversary, I decided to clean out my medical book because if I'm traveling, I don't need all 3 years of history. It's really the current stuff that's more important. But I read some of the reports from University of Florida where my surgery was that I hadn't really read before. And I was out because when they took me from Orlando to Gainesville in a helicopter, they finally knocked me out. They gave me fentanyl and whatever, and finally just said, okay. And I didn't wake up until after surgery. So there were notes in there about the patient is unconscious, not able to give consent. We're doing emergency medical consent, and because my wife wasn't there, she was in Michigan and all that. So I was by myself at that hospital. So it's just interesting when you say, they just did what they had to do. I had no choice, and I don't think I would have said no anyways. But that opened my eyes a little bit.
I mean, just flicking back to memory, it's a strange thing because I would actually say there were gaps, or there are gaps in my memory now prior to the tear, in the sort of months and weeks before that. And I'm sort of puzzled about that, and I that was a period where I was going through a lot of kind of grief and through the loss of a lot of family members, and I think that may well be my mind's way of kind of trying to manage it too. We don't really need to remember this.
Yeah. It's probably better that we don't, because I've had days where I said, gosh, I wish I could figure out how to remember, but then it's like, you probably really don't need to. It's not something, that's not a memory you want to have and go over, and probably be even more triggering, to have all of that. So our mind, I guess that's self-care in a sense,
Absolutely,
our brain.
And self-care is an evolving process. They also have to deal. Our self-care will change as we get older and things like that. And so, talking of that, how is your energy levels these days, and things like sleep, and you've obviously got a lot of dietary awareness. And would also be interested in knowing, has it also reframed your attitudes to diet? I know I've just thrown 3 questions at you there.
No, that's okay. The energy levels are up and down. Okay, because I still have, I've developed leaky valves, all three of them are, moderate, okay, slight to moderate. And so there are days that I don't have a lot of energy, or I'm really short of breath, just out of nowhere, and then other days, I mean, I'm great. I mean, I can get up and go and do whatever I want, and uh, but when those bad days are there, I kind of go with the flow. I don't necessarily fight them either. I don't say I'm not gonna, I can't be tired. I got to go, go, go. My body's talking to me, so will take it easy. Even when we traveled in Europe, and that's, we did 500,000 steps while we were walking around in Europe, and
Wow.
and but there were some days we hung really close to the hotel or wherever we were staying, and just didn't go and do those big treks, or we found something easy to do, because it was all great wherever we went, whatever we did. Even sitting in a cafe having coffee, was a treat and an experience. But
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to make the point about traveling. I mean, you don't always have to go with this condition. You don't have to go, on massive here, there, and everywheres in the city. You can see a city by sitting in a cafe at the end of the street. It's just depends on what you choose to see, in a way, doesn't it, with your eyes?
Exactly. Sometimes the simpler moments are the best. Those are where you get the best memories, and you just become, you immerse yourself in the local culture and whatever, and you get more of it out of that. The dietary side of it, I mean, as you know, aside from the aortic chef, why I'm the aortic chef, I've been a professional chef educator for years, and my last 6 years of teaching on the university level, I taught in the College of Medicine, and I taught a course called Culinary Medicine, teaching medical students, fourth-year med students, how to use food in their practices, and how to teach their patients how to eat healthier, rather than just handing them a piece of paper that said, don't eat this, give that up, and no fats, no this, no salt, which is, and then people don't really understand, and they tend to go overboard some of that. And I think, and I see that in some of our members too, that, the whole, and I'm talking the whole no salt thing, but, it's really not about no salt. You can't have no salt. And those that try to do no salt hate it. And they complain, about how terrible it is. But if you learn how to control salt, and work with what in my program, the Aortic Kitchen, we talk about no added salt. That's what I teach, how is to cook without adding additional salt, because there's plenty of salt in the foods that we eat, depending what we eat. Certain things we do have to give up, certain things that we love, I mean, I had an Italian importing business at one time, and salamis and sausages, one of my favorite things, but I haven't had one in 6 years. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Haven't had a
there
hot
I
dog.
am living in Spain,
For
and I'm
3
afraid
years.
I do have chorizo and jamon.
Yeah, I haven't had it 3 years. I'm sorry, not 6. Certain things. We talk about the deli meats and things like that. Things that are really high, where you can get your total allotment of sodium in one sandwich. That's not good, but there are other ways to control and to do and make things. So I kind of started really taking my own advice. If you seen it would change. So I had to practice what I preached. And my wife, Mindy's a registered dietitian, so retired. But so between the two of us, and I had to start listening a little more to what she had always said, because we always tended to fight in the kitchen. I was more about, the butter and the salt and all that. I used to teach students how to use salt in the kitchen to make food taste better in a restaurant, and that's the thing too. By restaurant dining has decreased exponentially. That's a really difficult place to eat, is out. because of the amount of sodium and fats that are in foods when you go into restaurants. Because those, especially Americans, we're addicted to that, fat, salt, and sugar. And that's what they do and what we do to make food taste better. But there are other ways around it, and there's ways to build flavor without that. So we do a lot of cooking, of course, but that's what I'm trying to teach people is how they can do it at home and make it taste good and look good and all those things.
So that idea of teaching the medical students how to use food in their practice, that sounds, progressive, which is great. I have to beg a little bit of forgiveness here because with my fried eggs, which I will have occasionally, I do sprinkle a little bit of salt on, Rob.
That's okay.
But I take your point about added salt. That's the key thing, because you can't buy a loaf of bread without having, it'll have salt in it, won't it?
Yep, and you've got to look. That's the label reading. I bought bread. I make a lot of my own. People know that, and I still put a little bit of salt. But if a formula calls for 2 teaspoons of salt or 1 in a however my loaves I'm making, I'll cut that down to a 1/4 teaspoon because you still need some salt in the formula to work with the yeast and all of that. And totally salt-free bread tastes terrible. But you don't need as much. But I find bread that I'll do like at Aldi, okay, or at Trader Joe's or wherever we go. But I look through them all, and most of the breads are here like 200 to 300 milligrams of sodium in a slice. But I just bought a loaf there. I found one loaf, and it's only got 60, which is huge.
In America, that information is on the packaging, I assume. Yes,
it is.
And it has to be there by law.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's tolerable, and then you learn how to, just I don't keep it. I don't write it down. I don't do that every day, but I have a good idea. And if I know I'm going out to eat. If I'm going to go out with dinner with friends or something, I will definitely restrict my salt during the day, knowing that I'll probably consume more at night, so I can stay within my limits, or try to stay within my limits for a day. If you're going to do something that's going to blow it away. And yet that one day, if you have to, if I go out and have a hot dog today, it's not going to kill me. Okay. But it's like giving up smoking, or drinking. All you need is one. And then you want another and another. And so I don't want to have that hot dog because I know it's it'll start that all over again. And I'll, who knows how my resistance is to that. So.
Yes, well, the body it gets accustomed to certain foods, doesn't it? And it knows it knows what it knows and what it likes.
Yeah, and now we joke about it. Just now, when we do get salty foods, they taste terrible. I can't even eat them. It's gotten to that point. Your body adjusts. It takes time, and your tastes change, and eventually you learn that when you taste it, it's like, I can't deal with it. Even simple things. Some dairy product, cottage cheese has a lot of salt in it. And we used to eat a lot of it, and cottage cheese, is great, but can't eat a tub of it. It's like taking a spoonful of salt now. It's just so, but which is good. Your body says, nope, this is what we like to eat anymore.
I'm sure we could talk about diet, for hours. I just want to bring Joshua back in as we're almost coming up to the top of the hour.
Yes, we are coming up to the top of the hour. We've been joined by Dante, Suitman Productions.
Hi there.
We were talking about, during your conversation when you mentioned how many days you were missing, Dante says, I'm missing 6 days myself. And Michael Smith says, unfortunately, I remember everything. And Molly has joined the chat.
Hi there, Molly.
Back to you guys.
Nice to have everybody with us. So, like I say, there's so much to talk about diet, and I would say that I pay much more attention to my diet than I used to. Of course, living, down the Mediterranean, I do eat a lot of fish and things like that, and salads. Try to go easy on the red meats and things like that. But would you advise people in terms of this condition, and when are there best times to eat in the day, do you think? And in terms of sleeping well and
Oh, I really listen to your body. Okay.
Mm.
I know people that say, the breakfast is the most important meal, and then some of us don't eat breakfast. I don't. I have stopped that. I've been losing a lot of weight recently. I'm down about. I'm almost 40 pounds now in the last,
Wow.
I don't know, 6 months, 7 months, since I had I had a small stroke in September, which was a result of everything else. Just another little gentle reminder of how fragile everything is. So, but there's all sorts of things. I mainly, I guess, I can't really give that advice, but
Everybody's different again, aren't they? I
exactly
mean,
right.
in
If,
down where I live, people eat much later in the evening, and yet the life expectancy here. Some people theorize that it's because I live in the sherry area and there's
yeah,
sherry in the taps, and the blood's
yeah,
being thinned
yeah. But this idea, the
all
Spaniards
the
are the
time
worst with
for the old people.
as far as eating dinner late. I thought
Yeah,
Italy was bad. Spain is just, boy, the restaurants don't even get busy till 11 o'clock at night.
absolutely, in the
It's
summer for sure. Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because there won't be.
So
Well, that's also, I think, in a way, in very hot places like Seville, you just can't go out in the middle of the day. So people aren't going out till 8 or 9 in the evening, and they're not going to bed till then, 3 or 4, because it has been so hot. They want to enjoy that time when it's a little bit cooler, and then they'll wake up later. Yes, obviously not all the time, but over the summer, and a lot of people are on
yeah,
holiday anyway.
yeah.
Um,
So, but the eating right that gets back to that self-care, you know,
mhm,
because then you know that you are doing something right for yourself, and it does help the attitude and make you feel better about yourself and your recovery and everything else. Getting past that challenge of the change is difficult, especially those that really, well, I guess I'll say, have been eating poorly throughout their
mm,
life,
mm.
uh, but learning to eat right. Uh, it's a very positive experience. It can be a very positive experience for people, mentally as well as physically,
Yeah.
I think.
Do
So,
you feel better for losing 40 pounds, Rob?
I'm sorry, do I feel?
Do you feel better? Do you feel that's given you more energy?
Yeah.
What
Oh,
about,
yeah.
do you feel better about your self-esteem, things like that?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's cost me a lot because I had to buy all new clothes now, recently. I was tired of having my pants fall down to my knees, even with the
Mm,
belt. So I, had to spend some dollars. And this move helped because I just threw out a lot of clothes before I left and forced myself to have to buy new ones.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I feel better, again, physically and emotionally. Uh, the weight loss has helped a lot, and I continue. I haven't reached my final goal yet, so
Mm.
but I'm getting there. I'm really close. So
That's
uh,
great. And as we come to the end of the show, I'm just going to bring us back to your catchphrase, which is "Do it now." Um, it's kind of like, almost a bit Nike, isn't it? But I sort of totally agree with you. And is there anything more you'd like to say about that? I mean, I have a bit of a stock question now, which is, what gives you joy? And is it
um,
simply that it is the doing of things now gives you a certain kind of joy? Oh, I'm doing this.
absolutely, yeah. Like I say, do it now because we don't know what tomorrow will bring, and but living that is really, and just enjoying my new life has given me a lot of joy. You know, the fact that I'm here and doing things and my new passions, you know, which are, or some of them are old passions that I never did, you know, the traveling, the spending more time with my family and finding, and I'll make the plug, finding the Aortic Hope and becoming very involved in it. That's one of my passions now is, you know, that's given me another purpose.
Sure.
To be here out with survivors, helping survivors and promoting that.
I'm
and
sure people are very grateful to you. And we've got to remember to tell people to like this,
yes,
to subscribe if they can. But yes, I think it is about sharing, isn't it, and supporting one another through this, which can be a nice part of self-care in itself.
Absolutely. We said it's very therapeutic. Every time I share, I feel a little better. And I watch those in groups and such that when the more they share, the more often they share, you can see the progression of how they feel better and how they deal with the emotional trauma that we go through, as well as those that, and I'll say it again, those that are, you know, find themselves crying and having the issues and not being able to do what they want to do and grieving about their past life. Therapy is a big, important part of that. Don't try to do it by yourself. There's no shame. There's no shame in going to a therapist. It's a tool. I'm sorry to call you a tool, John, but
that's fine. That's what some people do, both positively and negatively.
Yeah. But it's so important, and those that have and those watching, I know that have, will vouch for it that it was a turning point. It really is a turning point in the recovery is when you decide to go to therapy.
Well, you mentioned a key word for me there in the work that I do, which is that word shame, which is such a toxic thing in society because it makes us depressed and it can make us angry. It can weaken our self-esteem. No, there's absolutely no shame. And it's also, and I battle with this a little bit, that I had some shame about this condition. And you know, no, John, stop it. You know, there's nothing to be ashamed of. I've been ashamed about sharing what happened to me. And I think therapy can help people work through those, you know, various issues of shame that they may feel about talking about their innermost fears in a safe environment, confidential environment. Rob, want to thank you very much for coming on the show today. Hope it hasn't been too tiring for you. I know it's quite a stretch to talk about all of these issues. It's been a real pleasure, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of the community.
My pleasure. I'm glad I was here and can take part of this. You know, that's the same. I'm glad I can take part in anything that I can any day.
That's great.
Great.
I'll just wait for Joshua to close us out, and thank you very much for everybody for joining us.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And final thoughts here from Christina, who's joined the chat. I missed 7 days and forgot most of my hospital stay. My memory has always been bad. Can retain less than 10 years. And Molly says, like Mike, I remember everything while I was in incredible pain, but fortunately, I seem to not remember that too much.
Yeah.
Interesting. And thank you, gentlemen, for this great conversation.
Thank you for supporting us, Joshua.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.